Welcome back, Paulina.
Thank you.
Yep. So again, I originally met Paulina actually from another Cornellian, Ali Hamed, who's on the advisory council for our program. And I was trying, this must have been a couple of years ago, I can't remember, but I was trying to get a media relations person to help get coverage on one of our events. And Paulina at that point was running Fortune's term sheet, which is for people in startup and VC, one of the go-to daily news letters that comes into your email. And I got connected with Paulina, and we just kind of built this relationship over time. And luckily this year, she was willing to be a presenter at this conference, like I mentioned earlier. And then I thought, gosh, I should just really ask her to be an MC as well. And she graciously agreed. So we're now putting you back into the hot seat on the hot seat side. So I'm going to jump in. I will try to look at the Q&A. Again, if you have questions, do me a favor and put them in Q&A as opposed to the chat, so I can just look in one spot for those questions. It'll make it a little bit easier for me. Okay, so Polina,
Yes.
thanks for spending the day with us. I know it's been long so far, and for co-MC.
It's been great.
So what I really want to get into is, like, what do you do for a living, right? So, I mean, you're a journalist, and I'm really glad that you're here. But before we get into this, what do you do for a living and what really motivates you? You did migrate here from Bulgaria, and I would just love to hear why that happened. Was it something your parents wanted to do? I always like to get these stories, like with Eamon today talking about his migration from Turkey. Well, why did you come to the US from Bulgaria?
Yeah, so I was born in Bulgaria in 1991, and my dad, both my parents had grown up under kind of like a communist regime in Bulgaria, and then it transitioned to a democracy, kind of, not really, but they were there for that transition. And they were both chemical engineers in Bulgaria, like masters, PhD, whatever. And at the time, my dad, my entire life growing up, was always talking about the United States is this like bastion of freedom, and like that was his goal. He just wanted to get to the US. So at the time in Bulgaria, I think it's still going on. It's called the diversity lottery, and it's literally a lottery. People, you don't have to be like a diplomat's son to apply. You can be anybody, and you fill out applications and you send it in. And he did that every single year to the US. In 1999, my mom's application, because he would do two, one for her and one for him, she won. So we won a green card. And basically it's a year-long process for them to vet you, and you do interviews with the US Embassy and things like that. And then in 2000, we moved to the US, and I think that was like the best day of his life.
Wow. And so you were 9 years old or 10?
I was 8, because yeah.
And did you care about leaving Bulgaria? I mean,
at the time, like, everybody was so excited about the US, I just pictured it as Disney World. So I was like, yeah, I have friends in Bulgaria, but like, screw you, I'm going to see Mickey Mouse.
by the way, somebody just put in the chat something in Bulgarian, I'm guessing, because I can't read it. It looks like it
Let me see. Hold on. Oh yeah, they said hi, Polina. Hi,
there
Phil.
That's awesome. And before I forget, Sammy just asked whether we can get access to the recording. All the speakers will be, all the videos will be up on the conference website in about a week or so. Okay, so you are truly a trained journalist. You're the head of your university newspaper at Georgia. I think it was called what, R&B or something, or
the Red and Black.
The Red and Black. And then you had jobs at USA Today and CNN and Aussie and Fortune, and now you are with your own company, which you launched a few years ago and now are dedicated full time. Tell us about your career path. I mean, is this something that you knew you wanted to do? At what point in your life, and how did it actually evolve?
Yeah, so I've loved writing since I was literally 6 years old. Since I learned to write, I was writing. I still have like a little journal from when I was 6, like barely putting sentences together. But what I would do is I would write a question and then hand it off to a relative and make them answer it in writing, like next to me. And then I would take it
when you
back.
were sick, when you were 6?
When I was 6, yeah, I was like harassing them. So I was doing interviews in a very strange, weird way, but it's kind of cool now because like some of those grandparents have passed away and I have their handwriting. But so I've always loved writing. And then except for the fact that both my parents were chemical engineers. So I thought I would be a scientist. I didn't know you could like write for a living. So in high school, I was part of this like special magnet program, which meant that you took biochemistry, organic chemistry, microbiology in high school. So I did that, except I found out very quickly that I was really, really bad at doing experiments. I was just really good at writing the lab reports. So I would make a deal with my friends, like they would have to do everything, and then I would write the 15-page lab report. Everybody was very happy with that arrangement. But the thing that opened my eyes was that I loved the research part and I loved writing. And then in high school, I had an elective that I could pick, and I hated anything creative. Like I did not like singing. I did not like art. None of that. So the only other thing left was the newspaper class. So my friend joined, so I joined with her. And that was the best thing ever because I realized like, oh, you can research, you can interview, and you can write. It's like the 3 things I love. So in high school, I started writing, and my career path looks planned. It wasn't at all. I thought I would be a reporter covering higher ed. I don't know why that was my dream. I did not become that. I had never had any interest in business. I didn't take a single business class in college. And then I ended up writing for Fortune magazine, writing term sheet for Fortune magazine. But you can learn anything with Google and just asking a lot of questions. So that's what I did. But I've enjoyed the path, but it was kind of windy.
Very windy path. So it's clear that your journalism path took a big turn when you joined Fortune.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, it was, and then particularly with term sheet. I mean, that's like for people in the startup VC world, that's like a go-to daily. From our direct conversations, I can tell that you really like figuring out people. And by the way, I'm just going to put this plug in. So Polina's new company called The Profile, just Google it and subscribe. I mean, it's in-depth dossiers on people. So it's like she really likes people, or figuring them out and then reporting on them. So in Silicon Valley and venture capital in general, I'm guessing that it provided you a lot of people to figure out, because founders, there's no stereotype. I mean, there's a stereotype, I guess, but they come in like multicolor.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So tell us a little bit about your process for figuring out founders.
There is nothing I love more than figuring out people's motivations. Like, why are you doing the thing you are? And like, how did you get here? And why did you make that decision? Just like that fascinates me because, so the question I get most, I went to the University of Georgia. Sometimes I talk to students there. And the question I get most often is, but like, is it business boring, venture capital, like entrepreneurship, private equity? Sorry, no offense to the private equity people in here. And I was
private equity is boring, but that's okay.
So I never thought that business could be interesting either. Like growing up, I was not born, wanting to write about venture capital and deals at M&A. But what you find out is that actually those are the most interesting stories when you're put in any sort of industry. Once you figure out the characters and the personalities very quickly, you understand there's so much action and there's so much drama and nuance and like people doing weird things that it became super interesting. So the first thing I did when I joined Fortune is try to identify like who are the key players here and what do I need to know about them. And I went down some like really interesting rabbit holes. And then over time, you obviously learn that money touches everything and it is responsible for a lot of the decisions that are made in our society, whether it's in politics versus in fashion. Like a lot of it has to do with money. So finding that thread and I'm fascinated by people more so than concepts. And when I was doing term sheet, every time I learned a new term or a concept or a thing, I tried to associate it with the person that was the example for it.
Right. That's actually really interesting. Okay, so following up to that, this might be an easy question. Can you tell us who your 3 favorite famous entrepreneurs? So when I say famous, I mean people that most of us would probably know.
So first one would be Sarah Blakely, who built Spanx. Yep. She did it with no business background, no venture capital. She was one of the people, when I first moved to New York City at age 22, I didn't really know what I was wanting to do at all. And I read like a small article on her and I was like, whoa. And then I went down the rabbit hole and I think she's fascinating. The second one, actually, I don't know if people would know him, but you should. His name is Grant Achatz. He is the founder and chef at Alinea in Chicago. I mean, he's fascinating. He's
Wait, is this the guy that lost his sense of taste?
He's a chef who lost his sense of taste because he got tongue cancer and then became an even better chef because he realized that a lot of times taste comes from much more from visual and smell than it does from actually your tongue taste buds. Fascinating.
Yeah, no, I will say the only reason I knew that is because of your profile. Yeah. Because I read about him recently. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And the third one is a little controversial, but I think super interesting because I just love the idea of complicated characters. When you live your life and life didn't go the way you thought it was going to go and you still kind of tried to do your best. Martha Stewart.
Really?
Fascinating. Yes. Did you know that she's the first self-made female billionaire in America?
I didn't know. Know. It doesn't surprise me though. I mean, and that was probably, I bet her first billion came a long time ago.
Yeah, she was like the original influencer. She had TV shows, she had radio deals, she had a newsletter way before newsletters were a thing. Yeah.
Interesting. Have you ever interviewed her yourself?
I haven't, but I'm trying to.
Well, actually, let's ask a separate question. Who would be the top 3 people right now that you would like to interview personally?
Oh, God. So I would love to interview Elon Musk. He's had quite the year. I think that'll be a colorful one. I just interviewed him, so that doesn't count. Okay, Shonda Rhimes. I would love to interview.
Yeah. Crazy. Yep.
And let's see. I'm in the process of trying to interview. Have you heard of Noah Galloway? Okay, so he's a veteran. He went to Iraq. He was deployed. He ran over an explosive IED. Is that what it's called? So it blew up half of his body, his arm and his leg. So he was left with 2 limbs. And then he fell into a really deep depression, was arrested, got a DUI, went to jail for 10 days, and then kind of like turned his life around, started doing marathons and all sorts of like mud runners and things like that. Ended up on Dancing with the Stars. But he talks a lot about the idea of being stuck in a past chapter that kind of puts you in a depression. And he's like, I wrote the next few chapters of my life, so living there now.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. Yeah, Shonda Rhimes would just be incredible, actually.
I agree.
Yeah, what a creative force she is. Whew, unbelievable. I would like to get her to speak at one of our events. So if you interview her, you can put in a plug for us.
Will do.
Okay, so entrepreneurs are definitely creative type of people. Mm-hmm. Like we all know that for sure. You've interviewed hundreds of them. Can you share a few nuggets of information you have about how their minds work? Do you have any lessons that you can, not, I don't really like the word lessons learned, but like common threads throughout these creative entrepreneurs?
Yes, and I'm actually putting together like I want to do like a mini webinar on this exact topic, because creativity is such a mushy thing, but it's actually there's very practical things you can do to be a more creative person. First of all, I think creativity starts with asking the most obvious and basic questions that we usually take for granted. So when I told you about Grant Achatz, the chef, he's such an original thinker because he'll go into an art gallery and he'll see a really great piece of art and he'll look at it and he'll say, why can't I eat off of that? Who says that we have to eat on a tablecloth? And why are the plate manufacturers dictating how I serve my meals, essentially? And he even asked, like, why is it that when we eat, we do this motion? He's like, that hasn't ever innovated. So he came up with a floating food that changes the way you eat it. He creates basically a masterpiece on the table that you eat from. There are no plates, there are no forks and knives. It's awesome. Anyway, so just ask.
So have you actually done it?
Oh, I haven't gone. No.
Okay.
No, but watch it. There's a Chef's Table episode on him on Netflix. It's great.
Okay.
The next one is that creativity in anything original usually starts with something really terrible. So what I mean by that is, like, if you go look at the profile, the very first issues, which are on tiny letter, they were terrible. Like, the bones were there and the taste was there. Like, you could tell I had good taste, but just the formatting, the design, everything was bad. When I talked to Brandon Stanton from Humans of New York, when he first came up with Humans of New York, the bones were there. Like, he was like, I like taking pictures and I like talking to people. But his initial idea was to take photos and plop them on a map of New York, and just, that's it. No words, no interviews, nothing. That was an okay idea, but it wasn't a good idea. And it's not what makes Humans of New York today. But he said it's just the motion of starting to do it that he was able to arrive at that idea, versus like waiting for inspiration to hit and doing something. I think Casey Neistat, the video guy, he said, like, the doing part is the most important part of the creative process. And the third thing I'll say is from Shonda Rhimes. Basically, she made the point that people were like, how are you such a good writer? Like, so much drama, etc. And she was like, if you run every day, you're gonna naturally become a better runner, because your brain forms muscle memory and your muscles form muscle memory. Over time, it just gets easier and it's not as much of a slog. So she recommends doing something called like a mental trigger. So a ritual. She's a big fan of rituals.
Okay.
For her, it's like, when I have my green tea, I am ready to write. Like, just something in your brain clicks and it's like, all right, we're doing this now. A lot of runners have rituals. A lot of people who need to get in the zone quickly have rituals. So basically, take a habit that you already have and tack on whatever creative thing you want to do with it, whether it's writing or making music or whatever, and tack it on so your brain knows when this comes, then this comes. And for a while I was doing that with wine, which is not recommended, but like for me it's like writing at night. That, I don't know why, night, like, I am the best writer.
I bet your husband loves that.
Oh, yeah.
And congratulations, by the way. I know you're just recently married.
Thank you.
So I just lost my train of thought. You have written lots of stuff. I mean, literally lots and lots of stuff. Are there any particular articles that you're particularly proud of?
So there were two that I did at Fortune for the magazine, and that is a ruthless process. It's like very, very intense. Okay. One story I wrote on Kleiner Perkins, the venture capital firm, mm-hmm. and kind of how it fractured in half from the inside. That one took me, no joke, 6 months from start to finish. Wow. And this was on top of writing term sheet every day and doing other stuff. But I spent so much time and energy because I probably interviewed like 30 to 40 people for that story. And the reason that's important is because you need the granular, what exactly happened, because a lot of people didn't want to talk on the record. So you had to get them. That story taught me another thing, which was that the editor I was working with at the time told me something that's like changed my life. He said, your writing is sloppy because I can tell your thinking is sloppy. What he meant was you see the world in like black and white terms. You write in absolutes. I was writing like this. I was like, no one liked this boss. Everyone liked so-and-so. That's false, because there's always nuance. There's always that one person that has a complicated, like weird relationship. And the reason the Kleiner Perkins story turned out so well is because every word was precise, every thought was precise. There was so much detail and nuance that you're like, okay, like that happened and I was in the room. There was very little wiggle room for like, well, this could have been that, and there were no absolutes.
Yeah, that's actually really, really fascinating. Do you think, I mean, I think you're how old, 28?
29.
29. Have you found your dream job at 29?
I have.
I mean, that's really fortunate. I mean, most of us go through a bunch of career changes.
Yep.
So you think you'll be doing this forever?
Yes, as long as I'm writing and I'm learning, I'm good.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I'd like to go deeper into some of your personal views.
Okay.
And I kind of, put these into the category of things I wish I knew when I was younger. So, I mean, you are relatively young compared to me, at least. But so you're 29, which again, I think is really young. And for each of these things, I'm going to ask you just 3 things. You can elaborate on more if you like. But just tell me how you perceive these 3 things. So the first one is be interesting, not perfect.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So for a long time, I optimized for perfection. I thought if you're going to do something, it better be damn perfect. And the problem with that kind of thinking is that it prevents you from action and execution. So I read something, Malcolm Gladwell said this. He said that the movies, the art, the books, all that kind of stuff that sticks in people's minds, that makes it memorable, is because it was flawed and it wasn't perfectly blended together. It wasn't perfect. He was like, you want your work to leave an aftertaste so that it becomes memorable for your user, your reader, your customer, etc.
Interesting. Okay, next one. Competence is the antidote to fear.
Yeah. Okay. This one is astronaut. Oh my God, Chris Hadfield.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So
I know Chris. I know of Chris.
Yeah. So he basically he's done a lot. He went temporarily blind in space on a spacewalk because there was something that condensation, whatever, went in his eye, and because there's no gravity, it stayed in his eye. He couldn't see. But anyway, so they ask him a lot about fear. How do you get over fear? And he basically came up with this framework that's really helpful. He said, things aren't scary, people get scared. In other words, nothing is inherently dangerous. It's just how you look at it. So he was like, when you were little, you were learning to ride a bike. The bike was terrifying. It was like you could crash, you could bleed. Over time, as you got better, you became more competent and you got better and better at riding this bike, even though the bike stayed the same. Its danger level didn't go up or down. You are the one who changed.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, last one. Get proximate to suffering.
Yes. This is Brian Stevenson. He's a lawyer at the Equal Justice Initiative. He is fascinating. I'm obsessed with everything he does, but basically his point is there's a lot of people on social media yelling and screaming about the stuff they care about. Very few people actually get proximate to suffering. if you want to make any sort of change, you have to put yourself in a situation where you are with your eyes seeing what's going on and helping. So you can do that on a very small level, or you can do it on a very large scale. But the way I think about it is like, if you ever want to like change something, start with a person. When I first moved to New York, I didn't have money. I wanted to donate money, but I didn't have money. So I donated my time instead. I went and mentored a student in the Bronx and helped her literally get into college and go to college, which was awesome. But even like by changing one life like that, by helping somebody like that, she's then going to help her kids get into college, like all that stuff. So I think you just have to get close to the problems you want to see solved.
Great, great. I have a separate question that I meant to ask before.
Yeah.
This is about Shonda Rhimes, by the way. After you were talking, just made me think about her. So, you know, all of her shows, Grey's Anatomy, Scandal, they're all, they've been going on for so long. But like when I watched Scandal, there were so many crazy twists and turns in that show. Have you watched that series? I don't
know.
So it's almost surreal. But
Yeah.
I want to know, like, someone like Shonda, how far in advance do they actually write? Like, what do they know is going to happen? Like, or do they just keep developing plots as they go along? Do you know?
I can't speak to that, but I think that I think it's like constantly evolving. She's a very fast writer. There was recently a profile on her. She's just now, after 3 years ago, she struck a deal with Netflix to develop some shows, and now is the time that like they're coming out. And she's like, I'm not used to this pace. Like I'm used to a much faster situation.
Yeah, I'm sure she is. Okay, there's a question from the audience that says, what is your favorite startup book?
Startup book?
If you have one.
Oh my God, I actually read a lot. Like turn around. So actually, there was one written by the Andreessen Scott. I forget what's his last name, Scott. Anyway, there's one written by an Andreessen Horowitz investor, but I like the one that Bradley Tusk wrote.
Yep.
On regulation and how he navigated like working for governments. It's a really good book that explains the relationship between politics and Silicon Valley.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, the last question. I know you're quite the young entrepreneur, but if you could have done things differently, any one thing you would have done differently?
Oh, like ever?
Yeah.
I think. Okay, two things. I think one, I wouldn't have believed the hype when I was in college. Everybody, all my professors, my classmates, like everybody I knew was like, oh, you'll be so fine. Like graduating college, you've done internships at CNN, USA Today, like you've been editor of the paper. I got such a massive ego by the end of that I was like, I'm going to be president of the United States. Like nobody can stop me. But I think the problem with that is that basically I graduated college with no job offers and I had to move back home and live on my mom's couch. I was the cliche. But that taught me like, just because other people tell you you're great and you kind of know what you're supposed to do. I had done all the right things. I had checked all the right boxes and my life still didn't turn out the way I thought it would. So be open to surprise. And the second thing is that I really regret that my whole life I had tied my identity to something external. Actually, my husband taught me this. Like basically, you cannot be freer than when you tie your name and your own identity to like yourself and to your own work. Every single time, like when I was at Fortune, I had such a hard time leaving because I was like, editor and author of Term Sheet and editor at Fortune magazine sounds really damn great. Like, what am I going to walk into a cocktail party and be like, hi, I'm Polina Marinova with the profile. There's a certain ego that is natural that you wrap your whole identity around a job. don't do that. Do something for yourself that one day, if you ever want to leave, you can be proud of, to tie
Right.
your identity to.
That sounds like the advice Katya gave earlier today,
Yes.
too, about being true to yourself. Okay, so that's great. We're going to wrap it up then. But you can't leave because now it's your turn to interview Jeremy.
Oh, yes. Let's go. Okay. I'm
All
ready.
right.